Good afternoon. Thank you, Anthony. I'm George Downing from Downing Developments in Liverpool. I'm delighted to be here today. At Downings, we're already very proud of what we've achieved with Broadcasting Place. And so to be considered for this award is another fantastic accolade. I'd like to share with you some insights into the motivation behind this project and the challenging brief to which Alex and his colleagues at Feilden Clegg and Bradley responded to in such excellent style. But first, I thought I'd give you a little bit of background on my company and to help put that brief into context. Right. So, like so many in this room, we're a property business. In fact, we're actually developers, a construction company, and commercial landlords. We've built a wide range of schemes across the United Kingdom in residential, office and leisure sectors, but our roots lie firmly in building for education. 25 years ago, I was building up a portfolio of Victorian houses, renting them, refurbishing them and renting them out to students in my hometown of Liverpool. I then spotted the gap in the marketplace for secure city centre student villages rather than the dated, out-of-town, dormitory-style accommodation offered by most of the leading universities. So we soon became one of the first companies to bring the concept of purpose-built ensuite student accommodation to the UK city centres. Since then, we've grown to be one of the market leaders providing combined teaching and residential accommodation for the UK higher educational sector. Our projects are all driven by a desire to breathe new life into city centres by creating inspiring developments that people could be proud of. Away from our educational schemes, we are proud to own a piece of one of the world's most famous waterfronts, which is the Port of Liverpool building in Liverpool. This Grade 2 listed building is one of Liverpool's iconic Three Graces, and it's at the centrepiece of the city's UNESCO-designated World Heritage Conservation Site. Completed in 1907, it's an enduring symbol of Liverpool's legacy as an international port. Damaged during the Blitz and neglected for many years, it was punching well below its weight as a commercial office building until when we acquired it in 2001. Our challenge was to resolve an inherent conflict, the need to both preserve and restore its historic architecture whilst delivering a profitable product which satisfied the demands of modern business in the northwest of England. I'm very proud to say that we've now completed one of the UK's largely funded refurbishment of a listed building, a project which demanded painstaking attention to detail. By delicately restoring many of its period features and bringing its office suites and facilities up to date with modern standards, the building is now successfully competing with Grade A new builds schemes and to attract the higher quality of occupier that the building deserves. I'm mentioning this because with Broadcasting Place, we faced a similar conflict to build a world-class product for an institution competing on an international stage without comprising an affordability for the end user. However, conflict can ultimately complement, and in both cases, we applied the same principle. Basically, building quality and success hopefully will follow. So the brief. With a student... With a student population in Leeds of up to 65,000 students, Leeds is in the north of England, it might sound like a captive audience, but it's a very competitive market. The parents and students investing in education have very high expectations and are no longer prepared to accept the substandard living conditions that were once associated with university life. That means a demand for safe and a secure environment where everything has been thought of, from the perfect location to the comfort, interior design and modern facilities, so that the student can concentrate on getting the best out of the university experience. But crucially, it must be affordable. At the same time, institutions like Leeds Metropolitan University are competing at an international level to attract the highest and best students. To succeed, they need world-class accommodation, and they are increasingly relying on the private sector to fund and deliver this. Our brief demanded the best in design in the building, which embraced sustainability and had to be delivered inside a conservation area. In addition to the new teaching space and student residences, we were required to deliver the delivery of a new Baptist church for the local community and the preservation of a protected building, a former BBC headquarters, no less. And that's where Alex and his team came in, and so I will shortly pass you over to them. But before I do, I'd like you to take a closer look at Broadcasting Place and the impact it has had. Thank you very much.
The university has been in the centre of Leeds since its foundation back in the 19th century, and during that time we've occupied quite a few iconic buildings, I suppose. But over the last few years, Leeds Met has realised that it's necessary to keep your estate as up to date as possible, and also where possible to show that you're serious about architecture and architectural quality. So over the past few years we've added some buildings of real quality to the portfolio. This building, Broadcasting Place, is one that we've been in for just over a year, and I have to say that the building is working really well for us. Well, the first thing everybody says about Broadcasting Place is that it's a striking building. Some people have said that it's a like it or loathe it finish, but as time goes by, more people are saying, well, actually that is fantastic colour and a really amazing material. Cor-ten steel, you could say, has made an impact on the people of Leeds.
My favourite thing is the actual shape and the construction and design of the building, the way it stands out from everything else.
Well, when I was in my first year, my friend lived here last year, I was really jealous and it made me really want to live here. My parents really liked it, and he's a surveyor as well, my dad is, so he was really impressed.
At Leeds Met, we feel that by being in this building we're making a contribution to the way that the people of Leeds feel about their city.
Good afternoon, my name's Alex Whitbread. I'm a partner at Feilden Clegg Bradley Studios. I first just like to pass a couple of words on to Bill Pedersen. Firstly is to thank his main director, John Bushell, in the London office for helping me about 20 years ago, do some final design work on my architecture portfolio, which actually enabled me to finish my dissertation, which was called The American Skyscraper, The Appearance and Reality of Power. So for me to come here sort of 20 years later to this stage feels like a great honour. Sorry, can anybody hear me? I've slightly lost my thread now. The second point, now that I've got a bit of volume for you, is just to follow up on Anthony's comment about people coming from the north of England. 45 years ago, my father was due to take a job. He could either go to Calgary, or in this case, he could go to Leeds. So it turns out that I'm actually born and bred in Leeds, and my father worked in the university department that this building replaced. So I do have a personal interest. This is the site for Broadcasting Place, and I think the title of this talk is about changing context for tall buildings. This is a very specific listed and conservation area context on the edge of the city centre in Leeds, which is a city of 750,000 people in the north of England, primarily a Victorian city. In terms of transition from the city centre to the outer edges of the city, this is a diagram done by Cotter Kim and the city architect, talking about a central ring which envelops the city, making a transition from the city centre to the outer and inner suburbs. And I think one of the things that this building tries to do is to make a jump between inner city and outer city and begin to connect them together. This is the site itself. The university is up on the left-hand side to the north. And as you can see, this large area of urban motorway which has come through and really transformed the city centre, creating a very strong barrier. And part of our project, which was to move what was a former BBC studio site on, was actually to reconnect bits of the city and use this project to combine the tall building and lower buildings around there to stitch the city together again. The site itself showing a series of conservation areas, a very tricky site in terms of its listed building and listed building status. And as you can see, its evolution through time, the urban motorways coming through, the development of new, very striking university buildings, and a context of very dark and dense row housing from the Victorian era. And the city itself, this is the City Hall, which a group of Italian architects visited once and asked if they could find out where the black stone came from. This is also a view up the main road at Woodhouse Lane, looking towards the complete contrast, which is a white Portland stone building. So a city actually almost comprised of these quite intense, big Victorian urban buildings. And also, I think from my point of view, looking at this from a local context as a local Leeds lad, trying to bring a specificity to the building. This is some surrounding local landscape from the local hills, and also, again, this context of the Victorian architecture, where taking commercial and creating the civic was something that was very foremost in their minds. And as was mentioned earlier, this building was the site for the development of one of the first moving pictures by a French architect called a French filmmaker called Louis Le Prince. And I think we were very keen to bring a sort of a lightness to otherwise very big sculptural building. Some sculptures by local artists Henry Moore and Barbara Hepworth to the base there. And so just developing the basic conceptual approach where we tried to build sensitively but tall relative to these listed buildings to preserve and frame this view that had been established up Woodhouse Lane, and to begin to bring some of those kind of landscape metaphors into the building to create something which was almost a piece of landscape within the city itself. And this was a quick sketch really to help formulate the city's tall buildings policy, where we framed our site as the sort of nodal point at the top of a high brow hill, coming up from the centre of the city, going out towards the edge of the city with a sequence of churches, and then bringing a very large arc around the existing main urban ring road. But then moving closer into the site, you begin to see the setting of the building relative to open space and some of the larger urban gestures of the existing Metropolitan University and the university to the head up here. And also to create a very simple and straightforward site organisation about bringing people back through a site that had been closed off for the last 40 or 50 years, and to create a sense of place, but a sense of different contrast of spatial experience, reconnecting the city together. And this was the base site plan, where you can begin to see the urban motorway to the bottom, and then a sequence of routes and courts running through between these very densely packed buildings. The other main use on this site is actually the Faculty of Arts and Society, as Chris Bailey there described in the film, and how to integrate what is a new arts building with student residential accommodation to create a very intense mixed-use experience. Also in terms of bringing an architectural language from the city into a sort of residential area and an academic area to the north, and creating a building that was striking, modern and purposeful, yet at the same time quite responsive to its context. And this elevation, I think, shows quite well that we were establishing a strong base to the building, a very definite middle, and a raking attic top, which related to each of the facades of the buildings, but began to give a sort of different character as you moved around the site. So you can begin to see the variety of scales here. We're dealing with 2 or 3 stories, lower front entrance to Woodhouse Lane, the main studio buildings raking up to the back, with the tower then facing back towards the city centre itself. The tower has a south-facing elevation which is deliberately banked to give a very sculptural effect to the building, but also establishes very strong east and west orientation for the student rooms, so they get very good quality of light. And you can see the strong rakes giving it a very landscape feel and a very strong movemental feel around the building itself. The other element on the site was a Baptist church, which we also accommodated into the brief, and that's located in the large glazed section to the left there, linking also into the former Baptist church, which it ultimately replaced. There, the academic accommodation with the main cores, and the student tower to the left. Those are the routes then running through the building. I think to give it a very future-proof feeling as a sort of sequence of urban spaces, allowing for commercial development to come forward potentially in the future as the city expands out to the north. And I think then just looking at the student tower itself was actually a very simple and straightforward build, in a sense. 2 clusters of rooms with communal facilities, facilities for the disabled, and a large suite room to the back, double lift and single escape stair, with some very bright and straightforward accommodation, a very sort of intimate and dense residential tower there. And actually, in terms of the facade innovation, we modelled each of the facades through the building research establishment, so that each of the facades was individually modelled and evolved in terms of the daylighting requirements around each of the facades of the building, and that extends to the tower itself. So this was a piece of work in terms of publishing research. Our firm has worked since its inception 30 years ago on the environmental and sustainability aspects, and we have actually published our recent environmental handbook live online. So if you'd like to visit our website, you can download that for free. It's a 150-page book on the subject. And in terms of bringing some of those metaphors of filmic movement into this, this is a facade study for the ground floor where we used mirror glass to contrast with the cor-ten steel, which is the main body of the overall facade cladding. And also to begin to change the facade as it comes around the building to allow elements to disappear into the sky, to break down the mass of the building overall, which is big in its context, but not big in the context of the skyscrapers that we've been talking about today. I just wanted to say that there's a banner down at the bottom here, which has got a spread of the whole skyline of all the tall buildings that are being considered. Our building is actually concealed by one of the eyelets that have been punched in the bottom of the building there. We are 69 metres high, which is 11 times shorter than the Burj, which will follow us next. So we're tall, relatively speaking, but we're punching above our weight today a little bit, I think. So just some further facade studies, really showing how we tried to break up the mass of the building relative to environmental studies to provide a bit of variety as you move around the building itself. And then going down into the student tower, which is naturally ventilated, highly insulated, but very simply constructed. And these are some of the facade studies that we carried out just to get this building working with the environmental people, with English heritage and various other people that we had to deal with as the facade. So this is really just a couple of site pictures to show, as the building evolved, a very simple concrete frame, simple infill panels and cor-ten cladding over the top of that. This is the building related to its existing context, where you can see the general low-rise aspect of that area, but with the hills in the background and the main university building There's a complete contrast in white Portland stone behind. Building coming forward in its current green state at that point. Then moving through with the cantilevers of the south-facing tower element under construction there, and as finished with some very happy students walking away from the building. And I think in terms of the cladding, which has been one of the most controversial aspects of the building, this is the cladding as it went up on the building, dark, sort of miserable grey colour, but very quickly it became animated, and as you can see, as the guys worked their way down the tower there in terms of the scale, how the rust followed them as they walked and worked down the tower. And I'd just like to finish by taking you on a little sort of walking tour through the different aspects of this building, because I think one of the things that we've tried to do here is to provide a very specific building to Leeds. And I think the other thing about this building is it responds very immediately to all of its local contexts. So it tries to provide a very strong presence on the skyline, but at the same time it provides intimacy relative to the more sensitive conservation areas. I think one of the things that I personally wanted to try and do in Leeds was to bring something a bit bold and a bit new to the city, which had, to be quite honest, been quite staid in its architectural debate for a long time. And one of the things that I was adamant about was that the front elevation of this building would actually remain blank. It would provide a very sort of, I suppose, enigmatic facade relative to the city, relating to these larger Victorian buildings which themselves had no windows in. And this has become the sort of emblem of the building in a sense. And I think that was the thing, the stacking of those main elevations was to try and provide mass on the sky where you could see it. But as you approach the building, which appears in various different contexts and guises as you move around the city, it gives you a little bit of a different flavour of itself. And this is as you approach more closely with the large green space to the south, still giving very little away of itself. And as you get gradually closer, the building sort of opens up and reveals itself to you. This is the main view up Woodhouse Lane, which is the main route out of the city to the north. And how we sit it relative to these very sensitive listed buildings, most of which are in a local sandstone. But the wider context of that part of Leeds is that it's a very brick-dominated piece. So we were trying to find a material that was bold, but at the same time actually weathered to a background material. So we wanted something that was bold in its scale, but also sensitive in its material quality. The building also fronts the freeway very dramatically, which falls away into a sort of 6-lane ditch in front of it. And I think the longer-term aspiration is to actually begin to bridge over this and pull this building back very much more into the city centre. But as you can see there, the different building masses responding to the different scales, the freeway on one side and the listed broadcasting house on the other. And then pulling back towards, to give the view in terms of the context of the other university buildings and the spires as they work up Woodhouse Lane. I think to see this building very much as a sort of part of a longer and wider tradition of sort of urban, smaller scale, but contextually very important civic buildings. And these are just a few more of how the tower then steps down into the lower rise blocks. And also how the taller building can actually free up area on the site to provide more intimate and quite generous spaces. Actually, this is an extremely tight site, but at the same time we were able to provide what were called ginnels in Leeds, very nice but very narrow little routes through. And then coming up to the main feature of the building, I suppose, are this sort of spiralling towered mass, and the way in which the daylighting study had influenced the orientation of the windows, which have these louvered panels which allow for natural ventilation but also prevent unruly students from throwing things out during the evenings when they've had too much to drink. And this is the wider central space in the middle of the plot, which now has a number of large trees in it. And this provides a sort of major route through, which allows you to walk through this part of Leeds without actually coming into contact with the freeway, which provides a completely new sort of urban experience which connects up into the residential and academic neighbourhoods to the north. and also elements of previous buildings that we've actually built into the broadcasting place. This is the previous facade of the BBC Studios, which was demolished as part of this job, and we saved this frieze and built it into the corner of the building. There are also a number of artworks and other pieces that are built into the wider context of this building. And this is one of the routes through the beneath the tower, actually, which allows for future connectivity as the city expands. And to my amazement, we've still managed to build this in mirrored glass, so you can walk in here and it's a bit like a fun fair at ground level, which is a complete contrast to the cor-ten building itself. Again, in the context of the surrounding churches, with the main stone facades here, with the building providing this ever-changing setting as you move around it at the lower levels. And then related to the row houses further to the north, and this sort of sweeping arc of very large, this is about a 300-metre long elevation, actually, of these row houses, and the building sitting in the context of that. And as you move round, some very, very sharp corners on some of these blocks as they rake up towards the north. You could have somebody's eye out with those if you're not careful. And then another one of these ginnels working its way down here, where you can see the reflectivity of those lower levels guiding you through, and the tower facing back to the city in the corner. And the tower at night. And I almost wanted to conclude on one last point, which is one of the wonderful things about building in your own home city is that you really feel the criticism. And I think the other thing about this was that it was the first project that I'd worked on and that we as a practice have worked on that was really sort of internet active. There were websites about this, there was all kinds of debate and discussion about this building, and it polarised opinion, but in the most productive and fantastic way, that I really couldn't have imagined that people would care so much all of a sudden about what their opinion was about this rusty building. And so I feel enormously proud, even though I don't know if you can read this, but this was before the building was finished. But this piece of modern architecture is so bad that it makes a multi-storey car park look like the Taj Mahal. But there were some other nice benefits of this, this is one off the Flickr website, which actually asks whether this building is for real and whether the person who wrote the quote could have a pint of what the architect was drinking. So we'll come to the drinks later on. But I think working on this has been, for me, a very, very positive experience. But I think it's been an abject lesson in how you can bring a number of possibly quite conflicting groups together in a very challenging site in what actually would be considered in Britain and in Europe a site in terms of a sort of conservation area and listed building context that you would not build tall and that you would not build particularly brave. And I think what has been very positive for us is that we've hopefully managed to prove that you can do both. So thank you very much.